or their district wants. I don't know if that answered the question, but feel free to follow up on that. Yeah.
Yeah, it did. I think it's particularly interesting, precisely the aspect of the approach having to be, through that, having that geographical sense. I think it's definitely interesting to hear about that, and it's something that is particular to a specific construction of a political model. Maybe I can just mention briefly that here in Portugal, it's different in the sense that the idea is for all of the representatives in parliament, although they are elected in multi-member constituencies, they're supposed to represent the whole country. So even though they are elected in a particular region, their responsibility is towards the entire country, and that's how they're supposed to take their office. So I think it's definitely interesting that you have this sort of particularity of having to make those like geographic considerations. So now I'd like to hear Maikel's response.
Yep. That's actually a very good point. And what we have to consider is we have to see the global picture and the environment we live in and we work in. And that's different for every country. In Canada, Canada's economy is largely resource-based. We have a lot of wood. We have a lot of natural resources which are used to contribute to the country's wealth and economy. The government has realized that it has to strengthen the high-tech sector in the future. So this brings us in. So I encourage everyone to look around what environment you're in. What are the drivers of your economy? What are the drivers of the wealth of the people in your country? And that's different in every country. Some countries are very heavily high-tech based. And then the question is, what are you talking about? Are you talking about the big companies? Are you talking about medium-sized companies, small high-tech companies? What drives your economy? What contributes to the wealth of your country, to the wealth of your people? And that's the point where we come in. You cannot ask, there's no point in asking in every country, every society in every country asking for the same things. We want to support our society the best we can. So in Canada, we are trying to support this change from a resource-based economy to a more high-tech and technology-driven economy. So this is our role in Canada. This is the role of physicists and engineers that we have in Canada, which is different from the role that they have in the United States, for instance, or in Europe. Even within Europe, the countries are very different. If you compare the countries in Northern Europe with the Southern European countries, the economy is very different. So there's no point in asking for the same things in every country. We have to listen carefully. What's our role in that particular society that we live in? What kind of training do we have to provide to the students? And what kind of research do we have to do in terms of like the funding? If I'm a researcher and I'm looking for funding opportunities, and I'm also working with agencies to establish funding opportunities, what are the fields that we as a society should put money in to get something out as well? There's no point in, of course, research is always fun and interesting, and you can always do fun things in the lab, but at some point you want to have an impact. You want to help people, you want to contribute to the health of people, you want to see your students have a good career. You want to train them in relevant fields such that when they go on and when they find a job and they can support a family and they are happy with their life and so on. So it's the big picture that we have to see. And We have to pay attention to the particular environment we live in. And what Jen said is true. There are provinces in Canada where there's basically no high-tech industry at all, which are entirely based on natural resources. They dig, they produce charcoal and oil and gas. Why should they spend their money on us? There's other provinces like Ontario, for instance, which is very heavily science and research and high-tech based. We have to listen carefully. And as I said, we are only one voice. And I feel that our job is to work with politicians and decision makers on the bigger picture, because otherwise they won't listen. If we just ask for things, for random things, then there's no point. And also we will not have a positive impact on the society and on the economy, on health. If you look at Corona, for instance, how can we contribute to the current pandemic? How can we help the society and help people to overcome this situation and still have a positive impact there?
Okay, thank you very much. I think those were very interesting points from both of you. And this sort of leads me to the second aspect of the two that I mentioned I wanted to bring forward first. So considering this relationship and this approach that you have to have with politicians and with political power. So, for example, Jen mentioned those sort of advocacy coalitions that you try to build to sort of give more, with unity from several organizations for a specific common purpose. That definitely helps in promoting that purpose, that of advocating for more, whether it is more funding or specific policy goals. And Maikel mentioned also the matter of students a lot of times are discouraged from pursuing studies and a career in STEM fields because there's the common idea that it's very difficult. It takes a particular very already almost naturally advanced state of mind, and that I think that idea that is sort of built in into a lot of into the sort of the social thought of a lot of societies, I think definitely leads a lot of times into less people in STEM than would actually be necessary for a healthy development of science and technology. So these, I'm sort of connecting these 2 points to an idea that, of course, although there are different interests that oftentimes conflict, when you have a generalized idea that a certain goal, a certain policy proposal is essentially beneficial to the whole of society, it is a lot easier to get political power to listen to that and to make that happen, because if the several constituencies, the various communities that they have to serve are all aware of the importance of something, of course, it is a lot easier to get them to understand and to act on, the policy goals related to science and technology. So what I would ask you is, what can you do to sort of promote that idea of the vital importance of science and technology, of funding, of giving students proper conditions to develop academically, of giving researchers conditions to develop professionally, and of course all of the practical applications that are useful for society. How do you engage essentially with the public to try to sort of generalize that idea of the necessary role of science and technology in society? I think we can begin with Maikel this time.
Yeah, that is a very good point. So politicians, if you want to have an impact, your proposals and your suggestions have to resonate. If they only hear it from you, they probably won't do too much. But if you have a multi-level approach, if your local politicians see high school students succeed in science, getting a good education, finding good jobs, and making the economy grow, then they see on different levels a positive impact of what we do on the overall society. And that's what they're looking for. They are not looking for, you know, someone just yelling out and saying, I need money for this. But, you know, I don't care what the overall, what the bigger picture is or what the impact is. No. If they hear positive things, if they see on social media success stories from high school students, maybe even from minorities or students who don't have an academic background, succeeding in such a difficult thing like science, and then they see that, you know, they see that these people continue and they grow throughout their career, and they find good jobs, they make enough money to support their families, and eventually they contribute to society and economy and make everything grow. This is a success story. This is the kind of success story that we want to tell. This is not just a one-day thing. We are not just asking for, give us money now and you never hear back from us. We want to have a long-lasting impact on society. We want to make sure that we have an impact and that the people, our people, contribute to society, to economy, and they're happy as well. They find good jobs. They are happy with their decisions. They are happy with the education that they got. They make enough money to support their families, have a happy life, and they feel appreciated members of the society eventually. These are the kind of success stories. And so what we do is we work with high school students. We have a portal where we provide resources for high school teachers, where they can download experiments in the classroom. When we have our yearly congresses, there's a teachers congress as well. We invite high school teachers and we give them hands-on experiments that they can directly from the Congress, they can take them into their classroom to motivate students. We give them material at hand. The same with undergraduate and graduate students at the university level. We provide resources, we connect people. When they come for our congresses, they can meet other faculty, they can meet other students, they start their network, and then it keeps going. Once they start their professional career, this is where, you know, the science policy, the science advocacy comes in, and we try to provide the environment that they need to grow. We try to support high-tech sectors, high-tech companies, such that our students actually find jobs. There's no point in us and me training students in my lab if they don't find a job later on. So I have to make sure that there is an economy as well for the students to have a career later on, and so on and so on and so on. And as a researcher, I'm trying to support the economy as well by doing research in important and relevant fields. We try to have an impact with what we do on Canadians, on the health of Canadians right now with Corona, on the wealth of Canadians, by supporting the economy and creating maybe new opportunities for Canadian economy in the future and so on. So what we need is a multi-level effort from elementary and high school all the way to academic sector, professional sector, and companies.
Okay, thank you very much. Jen?
Yeah, I'll just mention one of the programs that AIP runs is called Inside Science, and it's a news feed. So essentially what happens is they'll pick different topics and go out and do a professional kind of like video shoot of different scientists, and it's a little bit of a commentary just about what they do, what the science is, you know, kind of where they're located. And we feed that into the TV stations for free. And so they can just kind of integrate that into some of their broadcasts. And so we've seen, we do a little, sometimes study this. We will do a questionnaire of people before, and then a question, and have them watch the show, and then do a questionnaire afterwards. And so it's one of the ways that we try and, I would say, break down the barrier that the public sometimes feels with scientists, right? You know, people are kind of intimidated, or things are very highly technical, they don't relate to it, right? But you know, so we use the news on television in part to do that, and then we also have, and so part of what happens is we cover what's interesting at the time, right? So if there's a snowstorm, we're gonna do news about how do snowflakes form, right? And kind of like, we're gonna bring the science into this, right? So we do a lot of the science of sports, you know, the science of weather, right? Like the science of different psychologies. And so you're kind of just saying, like, as you're having this conversation, you know, here's a 60-second spot on just the scientific aspects of that. So that's one of the things we do.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, those projects that both of you mentioned sound very interesting, and it's definitely important to sort of bridge the language gap that you also talked about during your presentations, and the sort of the barriers that often exist between the public in general and the scientific community. And now I actually want to bring up a question from the audience, which basically aligns with a question that I had also thought of asking you, which is, so although as you, Jen, specifically mentioned during your presentation, like there's this different language and sort of approach to the work. There's a difference in these aspects between you know, scientists and politicians in general. So this, considering that you also mentioned the underrepresentation of people with a scientific background in the US Congress. So this is the question from the audience. Do we need more scientists in politics, as they have been trained in very different things than the usual sort of path of development of people in politics?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need more scientists at all levels of government and community engagement. So I think there's, you know, great opportunities for, you know, even students, you know, young people, but people at all levels to be on school boards, to go to town halls, right? To, you know, kind of go to different political, you know, people that are running for office during election, ask them some questions about the science, you know. you want to have the science at each level, you know, of society, right? So that you can feel comfortable and intersect with those people. I mean, I think scientists do, you know, kind of tend to be introverted, and they're not necessarily the people that are natural fits for politicians. But I think you see a lot. I think you see that kind of changing a little bit. But yeah, we definitely have organizations that have programs that help scientists run for office. But it doesn't have to be an elected position, right? It can be something like you're doing. It could be kind of just inviting people to your lab. It can be going to schools and doing demonstrations, right? Whatever it is, to have more of society not feel like science is the other, right? That we're all contributing, and that, you know, science is not, you know, kind of the stereotypical scientists, you know, in their lab, you know, just interested in their experiments, you know, that we're just members of the community like you are.
Yeah, thank you very much. Maikel?
Yeah, I don't think that the world's problems would be solved if all the politicians were scientists all of a sudden. I think that, you know, the running a democracy requires, we are part of the society. We are just, as Jen said, we are members of this community, and we want that all parts of the society are represented in the different positions and organs and such within democracy. So I don't think that scientists would always take, they might take a smart decision in a scientific way. They would look at, like, you know, they would look at papers and numbers and come up with decisions, but these decisions would not necessarily be the best decisions for a society, I believe. So it's a balanced thing there. What I do need is that a lot of the decisions should be informed by facts. A lot of the decisions that politicians take should be informed by evidence, and this evidence can be provided by science, in particular in important fields like what we are facing right now, global warming, corona, and so on. We need quantitative data. We need informed and educated decisions to do the right things there. So I'm not against people having a science background and understanding the fundamentals, but what our role here is to inform people in power, people on different levels. So we want to be a partner for them. Even if their background is different, they still want to take good decisions and make good recommendations. And when it comes to votes and so, they want to do the right thing, even if they don't have a background. So we want to be there, and we want to be able to provide answers if they have questions, because we are the scientists there. But it's a difficult role. No? I don't think that the solution would be to make every politician a scientist. I don't think that this would make a nice society, but who knows?
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's yeah, that wouldn't necessarily be the ideal scenario. Yeah, as you mentioned, the fundamental idea is to have all of the sectors and communities represented and being informed by each other to make sure they make the necessary, the optimal balance between all of the interests and necessities among society. So now I want to ask you, so as you mentioned, for example, topics like climate change and what we're facing now with the pandemic, they obviously require like scientific data to make informed decisions. But of course, unfortunately, I believe we're all aware that those decisions aren't always informed, and not necessarily because the information doesn't reach political decision makers, but a lot of times it's almost pure and simply denial for some kind of reason that is a lot of times hard to understand. So my question is, how do you address that in specific, sort of that denial that may exist from some decision makers on major scientific knowledge? And also, how do you make sure that a perception isn't created among the public that there's some kind of hidden agenda from, you know, physics and scientific organizations with a particular like ideological goal? How do you make sure or you know, try to engage in a way that sort of prevents that idea that there's some kind of hidden motivation behind the advocacy work of scientific organizations? We can start with Maikel.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So the first thing I think we have to acknowledge that these are valid voices in a democracy. These people have the right to express their opinion. And in that respect, our opinion is not any more important than theirs. Yeah? The bigger question eventually is for the politicians, because we want to take the right decision. We want that the economy grows, the society grows, our people have more, but we want to create jobs and so on. So the question eventually is, these people, they hear all these voices, but they need enough experience or training or background to be able to tell, you know, what decision should I take? What is the right decision at this point? And I think the way to do that is, this is definitely a long shot. We need to educate the public. We need better educated people overall. So it starts in schools again. We need to educate people in science such that when they hear these things, they by themselves can decide if this makes sense, what these people are saying, or if it doesn't make sense. There's nothing that you could just like put on top of people and say, oh, you shut up, we do it this way because this is the better way. This is not how democracy works. Yeah. So overall, I think, I mean, every country is different again, but these voices are valid, but we want to make sure that we as a society, that our politicians take the right decisions, and they need to be informed, they need to be educated, and we need to have people people everywhere with at least some knowledge of science, some science background, such that they can tell, oh, this makes sense, or this statement does not make sense, or what should I actually do? It's a difficult question because, as I said, I don't think that a society where the scientists are in power would necessarily be the best country in the world. I don't think this is the case. Yeah? We think that the democracy, that the diverse group of people takes the best decisions, and I fully support this thing. So we are one voice in that choir, and we think we play an important role, and this is what I support. But I don't think that every person in power should necessarily be a scientist. This is not the right thing, I think.
Okay, thank you very much, Jen.
So I think what's one of the things that's really exciting about science and doing advocacy for science is that there's a lot of different ways to talk about science and why it's great, right? So I've had one of the best congressional staff meetings that I ever had was in the office of a climate change denier, right? And so we actually had a climate scientist from that person's district in town to do advocacy visits as part of Climate Science Day, right? So this is her representative, and we know their position. They know our position, right? Going in, that's not a question. But they agreed to have the meeting, right? Which I think is a huge deal, right? You have all the congressional offices have, you know, hundreds of people trying to come in and meet with them all the time. And so the fact that they took our meeting, I thought was, you know, a real good sign. And then we didn't talk to them about the science, right? It's interesting because we kind of, you know, introduced the constituent and said kind of, you know, what they work on. And so, you know, and we said, you know, we understand your views on climate change at this point, but if you ever wanted to have, you know, a discussion about any of this stuff, you know, kind of off the record, or if you had some technical, you know, expertise that you needed, then we wanted to let you know this person lives in your district. But then we just ended up talking about, and I call this theme, science is a good neighbor, in part because, you know, scientific facilities can really ground a community, right? You think about the benefits is that you have people with good paying jobs, right? You have a good tax base there, but then they're also bringing in, you know, people that are traveling there, right? So you're supporting kind of like hotels, local gas stations, right? Like there's a whole economics in terms of like how many people does the university employ, right? Or how many people does this lab employ, right? And so there's so many aspects to the science, but I think there's that community aspect too, where you can talk about a lot of these institutions are going into schools, they're doing demonstrations for students. And so there's just this community and neighborhood aspect that I talk about a lot. And we had a really productive conversation with the climate change denier. It was his staff. And that was actually must have been like 10 or 15 years ago now. That person is now our vice president.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean that really shows that you know, things can be quite unpredictable. Although it at this point it would have been better if eventually the position had evolved. Yeah, but it's interesting that those interactions I think are also interesting, and as Maikel was saying, it's important to realize that just shutting out people that you know, have an idea that goes against the facts isn't, you know, the solution. The solution is precisely to make the necessary efforts to try to educate people, to try to convince them that there is evidence, there's that we're really talking about facts, and they should make as best an informed decision as possible. So I really liked this to address these sort of more general points in terms of you know, the interaction with political power and with the public in general. And now I think we could potentially address a point of a more international nature, because there's you know, both AIP and CAP probably engage. I say probably because I don't have specific knowledge, but probably engage in the sort of international physics scene. And so my question is sort of in the sense that, so although sort of in the regions of North America, Europe, some parts in Asia and Oceania, scientific development, investment in technology in general, there's a lot of capacity for that, and of course for historical reasons. So my question is, how do your organizations get involved in terms of sort of supporting or providing some kind of assistance regarding countries where there's less capacity to fund science, where often there's a lot of issues. I think we may have lost Maikel temporarily. Yeah. Let's just wait a few seconds to see if he can return quickly. Good.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. It was probably my internet that everything disappeared here.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. So I was saying, my question is in the sense of what can you do and what do you do to sort of support more particularly physics organizations in countries and regions of the world where there's less capacity for funding and supporting scientific and technological development. We can start with Jen, I think.
Yeah, I guess, for our organization, that's, kind of our intersection with the international more recently has been kind of on the immigration. And so like on limits on immigration. And so we did lead an effort to write a letter to the president. And we had, I think, 15 other scientific societies sign on to just, make them aware, kind of like discourage limitations on immigration, right? And kind of, what that means for the physical sciences enterprise and, why it's important that we have international collaboration. So I don't think we do a lot of outreach to other countries in terms of, kind of providing them with programming and resources. I know some of our member societies do that because they have a significant amount of international members. But because our members are societies, we just work a little bit differently.
Okay, thank you. Maikel?
Yeah, CAP has agreements with a couple of countries where we invite representatives from their organizations to our yearly congresses, for instance. We provide resources that we have, so they get free access to the resources on our webpage and the resources that we can provide from our offices. So because Canada and CAP is definitely a smaller player. I mean, we are not AIP or in the States. So we see that we are part of this bigger picture as well. So we do partner a lot with societies in Southern America, Europe, in Asia as well, and try to have an exchange which is often limited by the funding of in these countries, and then unfortunately we don't have an infinite amount of money that we can provide. But what we do is We invite representatives, as I said, to join us here for meetings and discussions, to have them involved at least.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I think I'll introduce a question here from the audience, which is specifically about one of the aspects that you mentioned, Jan, during your presentation. The question essentially goes in the sense of asking you to develop a bit further on why you had to lobby for the production of plutonium-238 during the 1990s, if I'm not mistaken.
Why we had to? Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because there are a lot of issues that kind of bubble up from the community. You know, there's a helium shortage, right? You know, kind of these kinds of, you know, very specific kind of niche science issues that lots of times policymakers will just take on, or you can kind of get someone to introduce a bill to work this out. But we knew that we needed the funding. And until we kind of got into the mix, we didn't realize why a solution hadn't kind of come together more easily like it does on things like helium, you know, kind of. And so we come to find out that so nuclear material is legally only able to be handled by the Department of Energy. And it would have to be produced by the Department of Energy for NASA, right? So then, as it turns out, the committees of jurisdiction within Congress that fund NASA and fund DOE are different. And so the committee that funds DOE was against giving any money to the Department of Energy to do this because they're not a user, right? So they wanted NASA to pay for everything because NASA's the user. And, you know, we know, sorry for the background noise. We know that NASA's a user, DOD is a user, but, you know, it's classified information. So it just turned out to be a jurisdictional issue that the basically the Energy and Water Committee didn't want to fund any of it. And we had to put all the money into the NASA funding bill, and then NASA pays DOE to be able to produce the plutonium-238. And so, you know, it's just a jurisdictional battle. We went in kind of like with thinking that maybe it was, you know, kind of people, you know, afraid of proliferation or, you know, issues, or, you know, kind of misunderstanding over weapons grade nuclear material versus, you know, what we might use for scientific experiments. But just didn't turn out to be any of that. It turned out to be about the money and about the jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Now I think I have a question here, which also sort of goes in the more international sense. Though it could, I think it could be interesting if you could give me sort of more personal perspective, basically on what is or what should be the role of, you know, the physics community, physics organizations in promoting peace and cooperation, not only when it comes to the you know, the interests of the scientific community, but also in the broader sense of society, or of societies and sort of humankind in general. So I think we can start with Maikel.
I think a lot of the, I mean, this is a very big question that you're asking. And of course, I don't have the answer, as probably nobody has. But a lot of the conflicts that you see internationally are about resources, are about health, are about wealth of people. And what we as a global community, a global society should be interested in, we should help everybody to reach a higher level, to bring up everybody's economy, to bring up everybody's health system to a standard that they feel they feel supported, and that people can have a happy life and they don't feel at a disadvantage in comparison to other people. And one solution that we have, or what we know, is technology. I'm not saying, as I said, technology is not always a solution, is not the solution to everything, like science, but technology can help to overcome diseases. Technology, in terms of all the devices that we have, you can improve communication. You can, and by doing so, you can improve the wealth and the well-being of people. And that's what we can provide. I don't think that, I mean, scientists often feel we think we are smart people and we think we have answers, but we have to be careful. It's one thing to have an answer to a scientific problem, and it's a completely other thing to think to have an answer to a societal problem. These are two very different things. We have maybe an informed opinion on issues on the society, but it's up to the society, it's up to the democracy to take their decisions, and they may be different from ours. So the one thing that we can do is, we think that by educating people, by educating students, by teaching them science and STEM, by having them go to university, by having them graduate, getting masters and PhDs, we think that on the longer term, the society will benefit from these things, because a higher level of education brings benefits in terms of for the economy, more high-tech developments, and so on. But this is a tough question. But I think that some of the tensions and some of the issues that we currently see might be solved by helping countries reach a higher level in terms of economic development, in terms of their level of health care that they can provide to their people, such that these countries don't feel at a disadvantage as compared to their neighbors, for instance.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. Jen?
As a scientific society, AIP really, we stay pretty much grounded in, kind of the technical issues, or, kind of the issues that are specifically touching our community. In part, right, we're representing our community, right? So if you think about like the body of physicists, right, there's going to be a range of opinions on almost any topic within that. And, I think if you're thinking about things like maybe racial justice, or, kind of access to education and stuff like that, we include that and talk about it in terms of how important it is for a population. But I don't think we do advocacy specifically, around that topic, because we would see that as a little bit more of the purview of other interest groups, and so if physicists wanted to do that, it's not necessarily, I think, through a scientific society is where I would recommend that they would, kind of put their efforts into that. That being said, I do think the physics community does still feel that a stewardship over the nuclear issues and nuclear weapons, because, you know, it was our community that did create that. So I know that some of our societies do some significant work on things like the reliable warheads, you know, and kind of long-term storage of nuclear waste and that kind of stuff. So, you know, there's a lot that is just specific to physics, you know, that can be pulled into that topic area.
Okay, thank you. And so now I just have a few more questions thought of here, although more in a bit more of a specific sort of focus. So as we and you just mentioned, for example, the matter of you know, racial justice, and I just wanted to bring up here, considering this is also fairly recent, and it was something that sort of impacted the whole world, which was the Black Lives Matter protests following the death of George Floyd. We saw a lot of participation, and I also followed several physics-related organizations and even some physicists that independently organized to show their their solidarity with the movement, to show that they share the view that there is a structural bias against racial minorities, and in particular, in this case, the Black community. And so my question is, what was the specific stance that your organizations took, and what is your approach to the issue, to tackling the problem of racial discrimination and underrepresentation in STEM fields and in physics in particular? I think we can start with Jen.
Yeah, so I mean, this was really, I was just really glad that AIP decided to engage in this space, right? Like, so sometimes, you know, I would say there's, you know, kind of more social issues that we don't, you know, get into the mix on, but we did here, and so I'm glad. So I mean, just for your audience, I mean, the underrepresentation of Black people in physics is striking. So we have seen the number of physics bachelor degrees since '95 double. There's, you know, the number of physics bachelors being awarded has doubled. We've seen a 36% increase in bachelor's degrees for minorities in the greater STEM field overall. We've only seen a 4% increase of Black students getting bachelor degrees in the US. And when you get up into the graduate level, it is even harder. Our country graduates less than 5 Black PhD physicists every year. So it's even hard to track the statistics on a lot of this stuff because you could probably name them. It's really kind of just a striking and kind of amazing thing. And we've seen the numbers in other fields go up. And you know, the minority representation in other scientific fields, right, you know, go up, but not in physics. And so, you know, this is what we had done the team up report on. And so, you know, talking about kind of culture and change within those departments. But then also, you know, there was a movement here in the US called Shut Down STEM. And it was, you know, to have people kind of pause, you know, for a day to contemplate our diversity issues and what we wanted to do. And so we did close our office that day, and, you know, kind of use that time, you know, for contemplation. And we did get a lot of pickup on the team up report, you know, in terms of people had taken that day to read the report and to think about, you know, what their part is in solving this. And so, you know, we have a lot of societies that made statements, and we have statements too. And then we also created a diversity like relief fund, right? So there's a relief fund for students, for Black students, and then there's also a relief fund for societies if they want to apply to, you know, AIP for some funding for a program. So there's an association of Black physicists that we're partnering with on that. So we have some diversity initiatives going on. We had certainly recognized the problem is striking in our community, and wanted to do a lot more. And, you know, it's just a really exciting time for us, because I feel like maybe we have a window of opportunity to make some significant change, and instead of kind of the incremental change that you normally see in public policy.
Yes, hopefully so. So, Maikel?
This is a big issue, and Canada as a society is very diverse. There's lots of people with very diverse backgrounds coming from different places all across the world, and we are aware of these issues as a society. Canada, even that the initiative is started with Black Lives Matter in Canada, we call it BIPOC. We call it Black, Indigenous, People of Color, because there's more people that we want to include in this initiative as well. And there is an issue, in particular in the STEM fields, and we try to understand where this comes from. What is the reason for certain groups being underrepresented in the student population, and also later on. So what we as a scientific society, as CAP, do is we follow our people from when they graduate in high school to bachelor degrees, master degrees, PhD degrees, to where they go on in their professional career and where they end up. And there is an obvious issue there, and it's hard to understand where it comes from to really fix it. The one thing that I think is, and I very much enjoy working with a very diverse group of people, and I think intelligence and is distributed uniformly across, you know, the entire society. And I like to be blown away by the creativity of people, by how smart they are, how they approach problems. And I'm often blown away when they have a different approach from mine. I very much enjoy it, and I think that's one of the strengths of science. And I also think that STEM is a field which is very permeable as well. Your parents, even if you're a first-time university student, as I am, you can still make it. You can still have a career, because what counts, at least I want to believe that what counts here is being smart, being willing to work hard. So what we want to offer an environment where people can thrive and where they can grow according to their capabilities, to the level of which they want to invest. We know that there are problems. There is bias, there's structural issues that we have to address as well. But on the other hand, we in science, we also welcome people. We want to welcome people, and we want to tell them that we are open. Come join us. What we can offer, if you're smart, if you want to work hard, if you enjoy doing science, there is a career in there for you. And we want to work with you to make that happen. But you're absolutely right. This is a big problem. We don't have the solution right now. We have different initiatives already for a number of years, because this is not it's not an entirely new topic. We are aware of the underrepresentation of certain groups. We are aware of the underrepresentation of females in STEM. And it's not an easy thing to solve. We want to bring these numbers up, and over a number of years, we have certain initiatives, and we can see that slowly these numbers come up. We slowly see progress in the field, but it's not an easy thing to do. And I can just tell from, as the graduate chair in physics, I'm responsible for the recruitment process. And for the second year in a row now, we reached 50% female students in the new incoming students, which is just I know people don't like the number, the percentage dropping here, but it is a big accomplishment, because the overall percentage right now is at about 20%. But all these things, they take effort. They won't just happen by themselves. We have to push. We have to help people to come in. We have to put incentives to make these people come in. We have to look after these people. And the very important thing for us is we have to create role models. We have to show other people that you can reach, you can be there. This could be you as well. And we don't have enough role models at the moment. So again, we don't have the solution. It's a slow process. We try to do the right things, but we are always happy to have suggestions on how we can improve, and so on.
Thank you very much. Yeah, those efforts are definitely necessary, and I think, for example, another dimension that often creates issues, particularly in access to higher education, for example, which of course also encompasses physics studies, is precisely the economic conditions that often sort of serve as barriers. The lack of economic conditions serves as a barrier to higher education. And here, of course, I'm aware of the particular situation in the United States, where student debt is definitely a major issue for many students. So my question is, what can you do to try to, in whatever way possible, potentially mitigate these barriers, both in terms of your sort of day-to-day activity and in terms of the advocacy in regards to the political pressure that you exert on politicians. I think we can start with Maikel.
The situation is again different from country to country. The US have a different system. The Canadian system is much closer to the European system, where you have to pay tuition, but the tuition is much smaller as compared to the United States, and there's a lot more support for students here. if your parents cannot support you adequately, for instance. So there are issues, like in the European system, often education is completely free. It's provided by society as a service. So, there you have to differentiate between different countries and between the different situations. I think even in Europe, with basically free education, this issue is there. There is an issue that people still, even that it's free, some underrepresented groups have a hard time finding their way into higher education, which tells us that it is a societal problem at the same time. It is a financial issue, but it is also a societal issue, like not encouraging people enough to go into higher education. As I said, I'm a first-time university student as well, and if you are from a family that does not encourage you to go into higher education, then you may end up just not doing it because it's not part of the community that you're usually in. So money is one thing, but there is a bigger issue there as well, that we have to encourage people. If you're smart enough, you should definitely go for a career in science. And eventually, at least in Canada, money is typically not the big issue. So if you're really, there's a lot of scholarships here, there's a lot of support for students, and I worked with many of these students in the past, and I absolutely love to see them grow and thrive and be very successful in this system there. So it's a multi-dimensional problem that we're facing here, which starts very early, which starts by educating the society as a whole. Then it starts by providing good education already on the school level, by identifying these students and giving them the opportunity to really have a good science education in high school, encouraging. We need good teachers. We have to pay our teachers well. There's no point in, only if you pay teachers well, you will have good people go into their career. We want good teachers I want the teachers of my kids to be good scientists. So we have to provide good education for the teachers. We have to provide a good career for them, such that the good people consider becoming teachers as well. So it's a multi-dimensional thing that goes through the entire society, I would think.
Okay, thank you very much. Jen?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what Maikel's talking about. I think, it's hard for, kind of individuals and organizations to try and figure out where they can help. I think that's a big part of the issue, is just how complex it is. And, so I think what we've done, is we're scientists, right? So we study the problem a bit, and so we can kind of start to see where our weak points are, right? So, there's things that have gained, a lot more acceptance within our community once we were able to kind of study them. So, there's studies that show if a student isn't at a particular level of math by 5th grade, that they can never go into STEM fields. They're never going to catch up, right? That there's an early education component to that is incredibly important. And so we have, a couple programs where we try and make a bridge where essentially if you get a degree in physics, in an additional couple months, you can earn your teaching certificate, right? So we try and make it easier for people to do teaching. And then we have, but, kind of for us, I mean, if we're talking about kind of the racial disparity, it really, a lot of that does come down to economics for us. White families in the US have an economic base that's about 10 times greater than Black families in the US. And so, you know, I think just, I don't know, I feel like we're on kind of this journey of discovery, and that there's been some things that we've been able to identify where we can have some influence. And then there's other things that we still are not sure of how to do it. But it's important, and we're putting resources to it. And you know, we hope to just continue. I think right now, because we're taking this kind of student-based perspective on the problem, that we're going to really, there's just a lot of potential to add to the conversation there.
Okay, thank you. I think we really sort of hit or arrived to the essential conclusion that you know, involving students in this process of advocating for more resources, you know, a more consideration for the contribution of the scientific community to society is absolutely important. So as a final question, I would ask you what you think the role students should play in terms of advocacy, and connected to that, what advice would you give to students that are already motivated, or even students that are just now starting, just now starting to consider getting involved in advocacy? We can start with Jen.
Right. So I encourage all students, you know, to definitely do advocacy, right? Kind of your voice is really, really important. When I go into congressional offices with students, it's really kind of, you see a real excitement and enthusiasm from congressional representatives to embrace students, right? Kind of students bring just like a lightness and, you know, kind of this optimism, you know, and dedication to the field and to advocacy that is just really exciting and really appealing, right? And so I've had a lot of good success with bringing students in. And I would say just, you know, kind of maybe try out advocacy in a setting that you feel comfortable with. And so, you know, kind of put your toe in the water. It doesn't even have to be physics, right? I mean, do you want to do some door knocking for maybe a political candidate, right? Do you, you know, kind of how do you want to start to do that? And because you can do advocacy in a way that you're comfortable, right? Without necessarily having to go and speak to a congressional representative, right? But I would say get to know your congressional representatives or your elected representatives, and start to have a dialogue with them. I mean, they're happy to hear from you. You're a constituent, they're representing you. They want to earn your vote. I think that's another reason why congressional offices here enjoy to see students, because they're kind of cultivating a lifetime voter in some ways by, you know, kind of giving them good attention. So, yeah, I see that there's huge potential, and I say, you know, kind of if you need, you know, kind of resources for that, you know, you definitely can turn to your scientific societies to help you. I know a lot of societies have, you know, kind of letter writing. You can just go onto their webpage and, put in your address and it'll kind of automatically send a letter to your member of Congress. And so, there's a lot of different ways to go about it. And I think there's room for everybody. And people will be really happy to see you there.
Okay, thank you very much. Maikel?
I mean, now I'm old, but believe me, I was like you not too long ago. So I know what it's like to be a student. I know what it's like to feel this urgency. I know what it's like to feel that something has to change. When you listen to us old people now, we talk about, oh, you have to write letters. Oh, you have to do this. And you're like, no, we have to do something. You feel this urgency. And having been a student like you, and now I have 3 teenage kids, and I see this creative power, and I can feel the urgency. What is often missing, and what was missing when I was a student, is you have to learn to focus and channel your creativity and your power. Otherwise, you're not getting anywhere. So what we old people talk about is some more or less established way to express your opinion and to reach out to have an impact. So you have, as a student, you have to find a way to use your creative power and this urgency to eventually do things with it. And when you listen to us, you're like, you're too boring, you're old, you're never getting anywhere. Maybe that's true. We need you. We need your power. We need your creativity. But what we can offer as societies, Jen and we can teach you how to use your creativity and your power to do things. So listen a little, don't listen too much to us, because we are old and you're young. We need you, but listen a little bit in the way how you can achieve things, how a democracy works, how you can reach out to people. This would be my thing. So don't listen too much to us, because you have to make a change. This is your job. But also look around, and before you waste your energy in whatever, and you're not getting anywhere, see how you can use your power and where you can have an impact. That would be my advice. Is that right, Jen?
Of course, yeah, absolutely. And the one thing that I forgot to say is, sometimes the most effective thing that you can do in any situation is to show people who you are, just as an individual, and how dedicated you are and how earnest you are, and with the integrity and the morals and the dedication. So I always tell people, whenever you're in a congressional office, if you ever get flustered, or if you ever forget what you thought you were going to say, just talk about your research. Show them that you're passionate about it, and show them who you are.
That's right. And your voice is equally important in this business. And we pay attention to your voice. It's not just the old people like us. You have the same amount of power and the same amount of say that we have. We just have to learn to communicate. It's like a family there. So don't feel that you're cut off and that you don't have any impact. That's totally not true. But we all have to learn how to work together and play this game in order to have an impact there.
Okay, thank you very much for those answers. Now I have checked, we don't have any more questions from the audience. So now I ask you just for a sort of closing statement from each of you for our session. Jen, you can start.
A bit of a surprise there. So I would just leave you with, I don't know if the term resonates internationally, but we talk here in the US about elevator speeches, right? It's kind of like how you might have an elevator ride, with a politician. And if you just had that amount of time, what would you have to say? And so I would encourage everybody to develop an elevator speech about what you care about in terms of physics, so that you can talk to the layperson and explain to them what's important to you. And I'll leave you with essentially the elevator speech that I have is that you know, if I talk to politicians, I say, there's probably a technical component to all of the policy issues that you're facing. And that's why you want to support science and physics.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Maikel?
And I can only, I mean, we covered a lot of topics in the questions already. I can only encourage you to try to participate in the decision making. And that starts in your local community, that starts when you're a student, that starts in your department, then it goes out into the faculty, the university. There's a bigger picture in your province, in the country that you live in, and then the federal thing as well. And I'm not saying that, I mean, the people who listen are obviously interested in science policy, I assume, otherwise they wouldn't be here. So it's not a must, so you don't have to do that. Yeah? But if you're interested, if you try to have an impact, if you like working with people, and if you try to have your opinion heard and have an impact, and then this is definitely a good thing. And there's a lot of levels where you can participate. You can work with societies like ours or GEMS. You can join us even as an undergrad student, as a grad student. You can work on different committees. Then on the bigger picture, if you're looking at a career in science policy, we need people like you. We need people with a science background who want to go into politics and who want to help politicians to take informed decisions as well. So there's a lot of room for people with your talents and with your interests. It's sometimes a little tricky because there's to find a career path, because there's not like you cannot like sign up for science policy and then there will be a job for you and you do things. You have to be a creative as well. You will have to find your own way in this thing, but there's definitely room for people like you. So I encourage everybody to participate in decision making on different levels. And if you like science, it's even a better thing. And if you're a smart scientist, we need you as a politician. We need you in decision making.
Very well. Perfect as well. Thank you. And now I want to thank everyone who's been watching us and everyone who watches this later. And of course, thank our speakers, both Jen and Maikel, for their availability for participating in this session. I enjoyed it very much, and this is a topic that is very dear to me as the current advocacy officer of IAPS. So I would also leave here a message to physics students that are part of IAPS, that you can maybe start, or if you're already involved in advocacy, also participate in the executive committee's advocacy group, which is fairly recent, but it's definitely a necessary component of the IAPS activities. So thank you all, and keep following the IAPS online activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for having me.